Firegirl Chapter 10. I can't believe you did that, Rich said to Jeff at lunch. You're in trouble, said Joey. You can't just not do what Mrs. Tracy says you have to, especially not a prayer thing. The nuns will get on your case. It's at least attention for sure. Jeff shrugged, dropping his brown bag on the table. I'm not touching that girl, he said coolly. My mom's a nurse. You think she doesn't know that you can pick up diseases and stuff from touching sick people? She tells me all kinds of stories. You mean like AIDS? Asked Rich. Whoa. I stared at my sandwich. My heart was beating hard. Like AIDS? It's not like she's contagious or anything. Oh, what, like you know? Said Joey, looking at Jeff. She's not still burning, I said. You're lucky, said Jeff, pulling a piece of sandwich off and pushing it in his mouth. You don't have to stare at the back of her head all day. She looks like everybody else from behind, I said. Rich shook his head, looking at Jeff now. Not really, right? It's like I can see her skull through her burnt hair, said Jeff, more angry now, and her smell is making me sick. I should ask to move my seat. I've already pushed it back a lot, but not enough. I've got to move my seat. I glanced around the cafeteria, but I didn't see Jessica. It struck me that I had never seen her there. Where did she eat? In fact, I'm going to talk to Mrs. Tracy now, he said. He got up from the table with his bag in his hand. Where is she? I'll get her to move my seat. My mom will call her if I tell her to. I watched Jeff storm away from the table and out into the hall. After lunch, Mrs. Tracy started teaching English without saying a word about the hand-holding thing. I kept expecting her to say something or give Jeff harsh looks, but she never did. And Jeff, who stayed where he was in row 2 but moved his seat only another few inches back, didn't seem worried about getting punished. Either way, as Joey had warned, he might. Had he already talked with Mrs. Tracy? Did he actually convince her that there was some danger in being near Jessica or touching her? Did he tell his mother he would call the school? This was just crazy. But Mrs. Tracy said nothing at all about it. She began reading a poem about Chicago, one about trains, and another about Abraham Lincoln. The whole afternoon, Jessica's head was almost always bent down over her books. In fact, she hardly looked up for the rest of the day. I knew, because I found myself watching her a lot. Jessica was absent the next day, Friday, for treatment, Mrs. Tracy said. Jeff wasn't there either. He had gone for a long weekend to visit his father, who lived in New York with his girlfriend. I was amazed at how relieved I was that neither of them was there. Friday was great. I could just do my work. I had felt so sick to my stomach the day before from the talk on the schoolyard and the prayer ring, but Friday turned out really good. At lunch I sat alone and did some catch-up homework. Rich, Joey, and Eric were 2 tables away making faces and waving their hands about some show they had seen the night before. Courtney, Darlene, and Kayla were running around with some of the kindergartners doing something I didn't know about. That was all fine. It was the usual, and I liked it. A big chunk of the class time was taken up talking about and doing stuff for the elections. Mrs. Tracy said we would have our primary to choose candidates in a little over 2 weeks, so we had to get in high gear if we wanted to get everything done in time. That was fine with me. It felt like regular school again. I didn't see Jeff until the morning bus on Monday. He was waiting at the stop. He seemed more or less okay, but quiet. So how was your weekend in New York? I asked him. He shrugged. My dad gave me some stupid old comics. I don't even know why he has them there, but his girlfriend wanted them out. That's pretty much it. Yeah, what kind of stuff did you do? I never do anything there, he snapped, finally looking at me. The guy can't wait for the weekend to be over and for me to be gone. Really? Sorry, I said. He looked past me up the street to where the bus would come from. We're supposed to do all kinds of stuff. It's supposed to be different when I go there, but all he wants is to go places with his girlfriend. The jerk. What? They do stuff alone? I asked. They do stuff without you? What do they do? Nothing. I just wait. Plus, they live in this really tiny place. It's such a waste. When the bus finally came, he stomped up the steps and slumped into a seat. I sat down next to him, but he just stared out the window. I wanted to ask him about the car again, about bringing up his uncle didn't feel right then. When the bus was weaving around the streets near school, he suddenly ripped out a piece of loose-leaf paper and began to scrawl something on it. Then he balled it up, threw it to the floor under the seat. Jerk, he said a few times. He jumped off the bus, pretty much just stormed into the classroom, and slapped his notebooks down on his desk. Jessica wasn't there yet. Our bus must have been the first because Courtney wasn't there either. Shaking his head, Jeff looked over at me again. I mean, Deb, his girlfriend, is okay. But so what? You wouldn't believe the tiny place they have. I have to sleep on the couch with my feet practically in the oven. Plus, it stinks of bug spray. He keeps saying it's all he can get because my mother is forcing him to pay for school for me, and I should go to public school instead. He says I would probably even like it better. When I got home last night, my mother was on emergency shift anyway. I didn't see her till this morning. So she's not even there either. So who even cares? Jeff let all his breath out. It sounded really horrible for him. I couldn't picture it all because things were okay at my house. It was like trying to understand what it felt like to have cancer or something. I didn't know. I couldn't know. But it seemed like after every visit, he hated his father more and more. It made me feel guilty that I had both parents. Sorry it stinks so much, I said. You could come to my house after school, maybe. There's food at least. He shook his head. My mom always leaves me food. She just works a lot. Plus, you don't have any of the good stuff. The only comics you have are the ones I gave you. But it still seemed so incredibly dumb to talk about cars when he was having such a bad time at home. So I just said, yeah, you have better stuff. Class started and Jessica came in 20 minutes later. She was quiet and stayed to herself as usual. Since it was now only 2 weeks before the actual election, the whole project began to take up more and more class time. The day started with a half period of what Mrs. Tracy called the background part of her project. Talking the whole time, Samantha Embriano and Kayla tacked their extra credit poster project about primaries to the bulletin board. It was drawn with lots of different colored markers. Right after them, Darlene marched up with a better one, a flow chart with little orange Halloween lights fitted through the poster board. The lights showed how candidates for an office start up a campaign, how they raise money, how they get nominated, and how elections were done. Mrs. Tracy wouldn't allow us to campaign for class president until the end of each day, when we could get up and present a 5-minute speech about ourselves. But Darlene, at least, started right from the beginning. She wore a homemade Darlene button every day, and she brought in brownies for lunch 2 days in a row. Just because, she said, the ones with the nuts are marked with a nut on top. The others are plain. Eric Lobianco came in on Wednesday with his own plate of cookies. He said he baked them himself, which Darlene didn't believe. When the cookies were found to be not very good, Ryan said it was probably true that he had made them after all. Finally, it was time for the speeches and the real election posters to come out. Mrs. Tracy wanted everybody to do something, but not everyone did. Some kids just didn't want to run and said no. I didn't want to run for anything, but I didn't say so because no one asked me, so I just watched and listened. Karen talked about write-in candidates, which is when the person who votes can write in the name of someone who hasn't been officially nominated. It was a dual presentation with Melissa. They were thinking of running together as co-presidents, and Mrs. Tracy said that was okay for now. At the very end of the day on Wednesday, Courtney gave her talk. I listened to every single word. She spoke the same way she did at the reading group, her voice going high and low. She looked at the index cards some of the time, but didn't for quite a bit of it. She told us about how people who hold office really need to listen to the people they represent, even if they don't say much. She said that listening was what being elected to a position was really all about. It's the heart of the democratic process, she finished. When she said heart, I think I shivered. Her face did a little frown when she pronounced a word, as if she meant everything the word could mean. She looked out at the whole class, but at no one in particular when she said it. Then she nodded once and sat down. Jessica was out that day and the day before. I thought at first that she went to the hospital for more graftings, but then I thought that maybe she just had a cold and wasn't feeling well, or something. Mrs. Tracy didn't say why. Mostly because my mother kept at me to get out there and get involved, even though I didn't want to. That night, I made a small poster with my name stenciled under a blown-up photocopy of my last year's school picture. We were all around the kitchen table after dinner on Wednesday night looking at it. My mother frowned. It needs more. It needs somebody else, I said. Just a little pizzazz, she said, making a face at me. We were all thinking of things when my father's eyes lit up. He sat upright in his chair, a smile growing on his face. I've got it, he said. Then, not to me, but to my mother, he said, a vote for Tom is a vote for tomorrow, except that the T-O-M of tomorrow is capitalized, so that it reads, he moved his hands over the poster on the table in front of us, a vote for Tom is a vote for tomorrow. Get it? He looked at me. I looked at my mother. What? I said. That's good, said my mother. A few minutes later, the poster was done. A vote for Tom is a vote for tomorrow. I didn't get the slogan. I didn't like it because I wasn't sure exactly what it meant. How do you vote for tomorrow? What would a vote for tomorrow look like? Isn't tomorrow just a big question mark? They always say tomorrow never comes, right? The more I thought about it, the more I believed the slogan might mean nothing at all. And after Courtney talked about the whole democratic process thing and frowned when she said heart, I couldn't put up a poster that didn't mean anything. I looked at it in my room later, propped it up against my backpack, and got ready for school. Tom, T-O-M, I said. Get it? That night, as I lay in the dark, I kept replaying the scene where Courtney would look at the poster and frown. What does it mean? She would ask me seriously. My mind would go completely blank. Then I would suddenly stare past her to the end of the hall, where the tiles began popping up out of the floor. My father stopped me on the stairs the next afternoon. How did your friends like the poster? He asked. They love it, I said. It's funny, but also true. He seemed to like that. Did you do your talk yet? Tomorrow, I think. The idea was that I would talk about how politicians were in office for 2 or 4 or 6 years and were supposed to leave office with things better than when they got elected. If politicians kept doing that, the world would become a really better place. I felt bad, but there was no way I was going to talk in front of the class, and I sure didn't want to show that poster to anybody, not even Jeff. I had already decided to keep it in my locker until after the election. In the meantime, Joey Sisman kept threatening to nominate himself if no one else did and vote for himself too. On Friday morning, Jessica came in just after prayers. I think she timed coming in so she wouldn't have to be there for that. The day was a warm one again, and while I helped Mrs. Tracy hook the window pole on the latch of one of the upper windows, wondering whether tomorrow was going to be sunny, too, I thought I saw Courtney and Jessica talking to each other when Courtney was handing back papers. I remember I felt all nervous in my chest and guilty, as if I'd done something wrong again, and I was going to be found out. They probably just said a couple of words like, "Here you go," and "Thanks," but made me think that even though she'd been here for 2 weeks already, no one had really said much to Jessica. What I'd told my mother the week before was still true. I hated it, but everyone, the whole class, and me too, seemed happier the days she wasn't there. Then in the 3 minutes between subjects on Friday morning, while Mrs. Tracy was chatting in the hallway with another teacher, something else happened.